welcome to this episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. My name is Diane Collin. I am a woman with short hair, blue eyes, and glasses, and today I wear a striped black and white top. Behind me are an electronic piano and white shelves with books. This series presents artists, academics, and project leaders who dedicate their time and energy to a better accessibility for people with disabilities in the arts. You can find more of these conversations on our website, artsably.com, which is spelled ArtsAbly.com. Today, ArtsAbly is in conversation with Julia LaGrand, a classical violinist from Grand Rapids in Michigan. You can find the resources mentioned by Julia LaGrand during this episode on ArtsAbly's website in the blog section. Welcome to this new episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. Today, I am with Julia LaGrand, who is a classical violinist from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Welcome, Julia.
Hello, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here with us today. Okay, so you have a lot of things related to advocacy for young musicians, specifically young classical musicians with disabilities. And before talking about that, I wanted to know a little bit about you, how you started in your musical journey, what triggered the fact that you started violin, and everything that happened at the very beginning.
Awesome. So just to start off with a brief physical description, I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair, and I have been playing violin for most of my life. I started when I was 5 years old, really just because my mom asked me if I would be interested. She wanted to help give me a social space that might be less bound by normative communication. I think it can be hard for some blind children to fit in with sighted peers or to feel like they fit in with sighted peers. And so she wanted to really give me a clear space where music was central. And so she hoped that in that space, my disability would be a bit less central to how people perceived me. And it also, I think, just gave me a great um, other way to communicate, right? Beyond the sort of the daily, our typical standard ways of communicating, right? Communicating through music, making friendships through music, playing with other people. All of those things are so central. And I think were so helpful to me as a young person. I didn't take it super seriously for many years. It was a lot of, sort of practicing when my mom told me to and not really having a ton of motivation to do it myself. But eventually, as I grew up and matured, I realized that I really, really loved it and that I wanted to spend the rest of my life pursuing music.
Very nice. And so are you using Braille music to learn your music?
So, my kind of journey and exploration of accessible formats has definitely been a bit on the complicated side, and I think I'm still in the middle of it. I started with the Suzuki method, where everyone learns by ear. So that kind of premise of that method is that for the first year or so, no one is using printed notation, which is part of the reason why it seemed like such a good fit for me to start there, because my parents weren't super aware of what notation might be available to me as a blind person. So I then kind of kept going by ear much longer than my sighted peers. And I learned a bit of Braille music when I was 9 or 10, but I didn't fully commit to incorporating it into my music. I worked on piano pieces that way, partly because I was just so much less advanced on the piano. I, took piano lessons very sporadically. So the music was not very complex, which made it easier to read in Braille. And also, I could read with one hand and play one hand on the piano. So I was able to read and play at the same time. And one of the things that can be a bit complicated about Braille music as a violinist is that I have to memorize everything before I can put it on the violin, because it takes hands to read Braille and it takes two hands to read to play the violin. So in that case, Braille, in that instance, Braille music kind of fell off for me. I then rediscovered it during my sophomore year of high school when I had too much time on my hands in the pandemic. And so I decided to dig into Braille music again. And I definitely pursued it further to the point where I do feel comfortable reading it and I use it for some things. I use it for reference, definitely, to get more details about a score. And I just finished 1 year of conservatory at the New England Conservatory of Music. And it was extremely helpful to have that in like my solfege classes where the emphasis is on sight singing. Um, and it was useful to have in chorus, these places where you do really you do so much singing that I could read the music and sing at the same time because my hands were not required for the music making in those instances. So I found Braille music super helpful there. And I think that as I get more comfortable with Braille music, as I continue to integrate it more into my life, I will use it more. But I also do really love using various other formats. So I do a lot of listening to recordings, but I also do work with computerized files so that I can get kind of a more objective look at the music, which is something that Braille allows me to do as well. But to really perceive the exact duration of every note, the exact markings that the composer had, that's all available in different accessible formats on the computer. So I can kind of scroll character by character, hear the note, and hear various attributes but I can also then hear kind of larger phrases in MIDI output and things like that. So that's a bit of a long answer, but that's my journey is always evolving in that direction.
I love long answers. I wanted to know what software are you using for your digital files?
So at this point, I am using the Dancing Dots suite mostly. So that has the Lime Allowed component, and that is where I'm getting a lot of the MIDI output, so I can, have it play phrases or chunks. But then I can also in Lime Allowed scroll, and it will read the attributes of each note, as I mentioned. And if I hook up a Braille display, Lime Allowed also allows me to view those same measures in Braille as I scroll through them. Um, Part of that suite is also Good Feel, which allows me to transcribe the whole thing into Braille, which is a really helpful tool to get kind of quick Braille transcription. But I tend to gravitate more towards Lime Aloud so that I can have the Braille and the audio at the same time, because I personally find that kind of a faster workflow for me. But it's a very personal thing, of course. And there are lots of different softwares that other blind people use to access their music in tons of creative ways.
When you need a new score, where do you go?
So that's always a bit complicated. So musescore.org has a lot of kind of open source XML files, because I can access very well these music XML files through Lime Aloud. And so there are a lot of those available, particularly for the kinds of very canonical public domain classical pieces that I'm playing. A fair number of those are available. But transcription services are also very useful, whether that's in kind of refining the Braille output. I do use transcription for that, because the automatic Braille is super helpful, but it can be good to get, a slightly more accurate picture with, kind of a professional transcriber's take on it. But also, I then part of the Dancing Dots suite is a scanner, and so one can scan music into basically, PDF format and then convert it into XML. Now, there tends to be still quite a few errors depending on the quality of the music, how clear it is. It can be varying degrees of difficult for the computer to understand what's going on. So it's still pretty important to have someone cited kind of proofing the XML file to make sure that everything on the page was captured in that conversion process. And then once I have it in an XML, I can use it in Lime Aloud, or I can also get, a more accurate Braille transcription, as I mentioned.
And when you were a student, or you are currently a student, I was wondering about the efforts it might have taken to receive the amount of accommodation that you need. Did you work with teachers saying, "Well, I need this specific format," or let's figure out another way to play together or to learn? Was there what was the amount of effort you had to put on that?
I would say that the greatest amount of effort I have had to put in is figuring out how to communicate my needs clearly and effectively. This is something I've thought a lot about, because I did, lots of programs for blind high schoolers kind of geared towards getting people ready to do a self-advocacy in college. And it was always something I didn't feel particularly daunted by. I felt that I understood my needs, I knew how to communicate, and I felt like I had it under control. But I think music felt like a very different kind of way to approach that self-advocacy question, because at least in my case, I didn't really have experience taking pretty much any of the classes I needed to take. It wasn't like I was taking a more advanced math class or a more advanced science class. I didn't have music theory instruction in my high school or anything like that. So as I did my freshman year at New England Conservatory, I really felt like I didn't have as good of a sense of my needs as I would have wanted to because I had never been in those situations. And so I think a lot of my self advocacy was experimentation, and then learning how to really effectively communicate the results of my experimentation. And I think, like every situation, there's going to be mixed inputs. There were teachers who were very willing to work with me, but a lot of them didn't have much experience working with a blind musician or had experience working with blind musicians who had very different sets of needs. I am someone who doesn't want to do just everything by ear. And so that was definitely different for even the teachers who had worked with blind musicians in the past. And so there's definitely a range of these are my needs, even though they might not be the same as the needs of the blind students who have come before me. And so that I think is also a bit of a tricky question, right? Articulating that, you know, all blind people are different, just like all people are different, and we all have different needs.
Yeah.
And so that was a layer. And then, yeah, I think it's just a matter of kind of the perceptions too that people have around what blind musicians should or would want to access. There are definitely lots of biases towards the supremacy of visual notation. So I've heard definitely concerns that Braille music lacks lacks things that visual notation conveys, and that has been something interesting to work through, kind of in this space of accommodations too. Is I understand that I am accessing things in a very different way than my sighted peers, and sometimes that does look like audio. Sometimes that does look like Braille notation. And so it's a matter of not only understanding my needs, but me feeling comfortable with the fact that I will be doing things a bit differently and I will be bringing things together creatively. And so I think that's almost as important as knowing my needs is feeling confident in the way I approach things and feeling that I don't have to justify my access to music at every turn.
Plus, there is the fact that even if you look at if you read visually the score, well, sorry, but the notation is not about all about the music, right? You also have to put your own personality in the way you are performing your music. So
Mm-hmm.
if the piano fortissimo notation, whatever the crescendo notation is something you can feel, well, go for it and have that integrated in your own personality and performance, right?
Definitely. And I mean, I think it's also such an interesting question too of how you feel that and how you take the recordings and the oral traditions that have come before, right? Because there, I think, are sometimes attitudes that one shouldn't listen to too many performances. And while I totally, of a piece one's working on, and I totally think that makes sense to some extent. And I would never want to copy any individual's interpretation of a piece, right? Because music is about making individual art. But I also think that part of, making art is understanding the context from which it has come and the ways people have shaped it in the past. And so I think understanding things orally and understanding by listening is a very totally valid way to approach music. And I don't think that's the dominant attitude in a lot of spaces around classical music.
You're right. And as a musicologist, I can tell you, when I love studying the different versions and recording how it evolved in the
Mhm.
time, and
Yeah.
even the way an editor will edit the score is fascinating because
Mhm.
it's very an editor has the same mindset as a performer who's going to say, okay, the way I see it, the way I
Mhm.
understand this composer wrote it is this way. But yeah,
Right.
okay, but that's personal. That's
Right.
yeah, I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
And you, where are you right now in your studies?
So I did my freshman year at New England Conservatory in violin performance, and I felt that the performance education I was getting was fantastic, but that I wanted to explore a bit further and have a bit broader of a liberal arts education. So I am transferring programs, and um, because of the structure of the degrees, I will be starting over functionally. So I will be starting as a freshman in the Harvard and NEC dual degree combined bachelor's master's program this fall.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You had a series of awards during your the past years. What award did you get?
Well, the most recent award I have gotten was I was very honored to be selected as a winner of the 2024 Kennedy Center's VSA International Young Musicians Competition, which is a program that highlights young musicians age 14 to 25 with disabilities. And so I was a finalist in that last year, and this year I'm a winner. So I will have the opportunity to perform at the Kennedy Center, which is a wonderful gift, and I am really excited to have received this award. I think it's such an opportunity to connect with disabled musicians, and I really do love programs that help disabled musicians connect with each other. I've also participated in the Bella competition, and I won that competition in 2020, and that is geared towards blind musicians more specifically. And that was also a really great way to connect with the other blind finalists. And it's so exciting to form community through awards like this. I think it's really lovely.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
really good. When are you performing at the Kennedy Center?
So that performance is July 27th. So after this recording, but before this airs.
Wow, in a few days. Wow, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
thank you.
Um, I um, I wonder if you could talk about a specific project that you have worked on and that was really important for your career.
Thank you. I think one of the projects closest to my heart was the work I did with NPR's From the Top. So From the Top is a show highlighting classical musicians aged 8 to 18 in the United States. And I first appeared on the show in 2021 as a performer, and I was the first blind performer on the show. And so it kind of got me thinking about the ways in which it would be really fascinating to have an episode highlighting disability, um, both to let disabled musicians really intentionally talk about their disabilities and to really have space for these disabled musicians to talk about other things. Because sometimes when a performer with a disability comes onto any sort of interview or any sort of public appearance, it can be really easy for the focus just to be on the disability, because that's a really obvious sort of contributor, or often an obvious contributor, to who they are as a musician. But for a lot of musicians, it's a central part of them, but it is only one really important part of their identity. And so the interview segments of this show, because it highlights both interviews and performances by young musicians, really, I thought, could be a great place to allow disabled musicians to tell their stories in the way they wanted them to be told. And so I came to From the Top with the idea of creating a specifically disability focused episode, and they agreed, and they really helped me lead the project, which was an incredible experience. So I got so much knowledge just from working through with them the process of trying to recruit different people, trying to reach out to different networks. That it took a while to really figure out how to connect well and how to really find these musicians who, because there are so many musicians with disabilities, but so many of those disabilities are non-apparent. And, it can be a complicated thing to decide to be on a program that does highlight disability. But we, from the top found just excellent, excellent young musicians to be featured on the program. Um, and so that was just a fantastic joy to then be able to hear these young musicians to play their pieces, to interview them, to get to know them. They were all just wonderful individuals. And as part of the program, we also did social media work that allowed an even greater number of disabled musicians to highlight their talents, because we, only did one episode. And of course, that really only let 4 young people, get that spot in the episode. So the Social Media Daily Joy campaign that From the Top puts together was another way for many more disabled artists to be spotlighted. And so that was a program I was really excited about to kind of broaden. And we also did in collaboration with the Kennedy Center, we put on a panel of disabled professional musicians as a way to really continue the dialogue with the From the Top community about, after being a young musician, transitioning into being a professional, because that transition can also, I think, feel daunting for everyone, and for people, for musicians with disabilities in particular. So those were kind of the components of it, and I'm so grateful that I was able to go host the show and to lead that panel and just be really involved in all of that process. It was an incredible experience.
I learned so much from this episode you recorded, you co-hosted.
Thank you.
I really, really enjoyed. So, for example, Joaquim Rodrigo is blind, and you are pointing out, you're educating people and saying, not a lot of people know that he's blind, and he
Mhm.
was using Braille music, and his wife was transcribing it.
Mhm.
But also this young 14 years old called Tristan Chen,
Yeah.
he's fantastic. He's full of energy and things like
Yeah.
that. It was really fantastic. But one of the parts that really was the highlight of the episode was your interview with Isaac Perlman.
Yes, thank you. I mean, that was an incredible experience for me, to be able to interview him. He has, been someone I've looked up to for such a long time, obviously as just an incredible violinist, but also someone who's taken disability advocacy really seriously. And I think that has always served to me as a powerful example of how disability advocacy can be combined with a career of performance. And I do remember kind of discovering that Perlman was disabled. And to me, that was a transformative moment, because there was this, person who obviously, everyone looks up to as having this incredible career. And to learn that that person was also disabled felt just incredibly empowering to me, because I think I spent a long time feeling like there were not many representations of disability in classical music, and I still feel that way to some extent. But before I found various communities that I am now really a part of, like, I think Itzhak Perlman was my first kind of major signifier that one could be disabled and do classical music at, obviously this just incredibly high level. And beyond that, I mean, I think, as I said, the fact that he had this career, but also that he took the time to be passionate about these advocacy concerns, and that he prioritizes increasing access. I think that was also just really powerful when I discovered that, because that is something I have always wanted to make be part of my career as well.
What is interesting with Isaac Perlman is that at the time when he was a child and he was discovered on TV,
Hmm.
he was in the spotlight. But then when he developed his career, and he recorded and he collaborated with all these great musicians around the world, um, he was known as a recording artist or as a performer artist. Actually, if you didn't go and attend one of the concerts, you had no idea that he had a
Hmm.
disability.
Hmm.
And today we have more more means of helping the representation and presence of artists with disabilities because we have internet, because sometimes we have TV, we have ROMPT. We're both part of this organization called ROMPT, who are doing a fantastic job of just trying to highlight the work of disabled artists. But in the classical world, if you didn't go to or look at this particular TV program where he was playing or go to a concert, you had no way of knowing that he had a disability. So he started speaking about his disability a little later in life.
Right.
When he was saying, okay, I'm using crutches and I have this routine of giving my violin to someone who's going to play with me, and then I'm going with my crutches, and then someone is giving me the violin, so most of the time the conductor, or if he was playing in quartet, it was one of the members of the quartet, for example. um,
Mhm.
but really it's like, when you think of it, at a certain point of his career he said, okay, enough is enough, I'm gonna advocate now. And that's fantastic. We need more people like that. And I believe you are the part of the generation really shaking our generation, saying, okay, we also have young artists with disabilities who are here, and we need a voice and a presence. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thank you for all of your work. Kind of facilitating so much of that conversation in all of the ways that you and your organization do. I do think it is fascinating, even just reading about and discussing with him that sort of transition, from going to sort of a not at all talking about the disability to making it an important part of how he talks about access. And I do think it's such a personal decision for every artist with a disability, the extent to which they want to talk about it. And I am so grateful that I have the opportunity to do that, because I think for me, it's just a crucial part of who I am artistically. I think disability really does enhance the way I look at the world. I think that disability is such a powerful and creative artistic force. And so I am really excited to talk about the fact that I am an artist with a disability. And so I'm grateful for all of the opportunities that I get to do that.
That's great. um, I wonder if you could talk about uh, the people who inspired you in your musical journey, or maybe had a particular space in your musical journey, and that might have influenced the way you are an advocate today, or the way you are performing today.
Oh, I mean, there are so many, and that's of course such a big question. I mean, I think I have been so fortunate to have, so many incredible teachers. I, I'm so grateful to all of them. And there have been so many ways in which they have encouraged me to develop my advocacy skills, which has been really important to me. I studied with Danielle Belen in high school, and I now study with Miriam Fried in college. And they have both been always challenging me to make my music making um, central to my artistry, but also to consider um, the bigger story I'm telling and the way I can use my music to shape the world more broadly. Specifically in the disability space, I think one really important mentor to me has been Adrienne and Antoine. His work has, I mean, always just excited me, and I was able to meet him when he performed with the Grand Rapids Symphony 2 or 3 years ago, and from then on, I was so excited to interact with this disabled artist who is making advocacy and education such a big part of his career. And since then, I have moved to Boston, and which is where he's based. And so he has been just an important mentor to me in Boston. I've gotten the chance to play with him and to really be mentored by him in more intentional ways. And that has been so crucial to me to have an artist in my life who is, really pursuing these joint goals of musical excellence and important collaboration and advocacy work and education. And so he's someone who has really inspired me to think more critically about the ways I can expand my vision for my future.
Well, I wish you all the best in everything you're doing right now. And don't hesitate if we can help at ArtsAbly to promote something or to, if you have a round table that is happening or a concert that is happening, or if we can help promote the young musicians with disabilities in classical world, don't hesitate to send that to us.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for having me here and just for all of the work that ArtsAbly is doing. It's such an impressive organization. And I'm so happy to be part of this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, have a great day and talk soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.